No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be going over part 2 in this 8-part series, talking about the Monday.com article that you shared with us last week on the leadership theories. And if you're joining us for the first time here and you didn't listen last week, we're basically going over the importance of understanding where the root of how you lead comes from. In essence, your leadership theory. And last week we talked about the great man theory, which is, if you haven't heard that yet, then definitely go back and listen after you're done with this episode. On this episode, we're going to be talking about part 2, which is trait theory of leadership. And trait theory of leadership is really similar to the great man theory, but it has kind of one key difference, and that's that whether or not somebody is a good leader isn't necessarily something you're born with, but these are definitely skills that you can learn, you can get better at, you can acquire. And so someone can start out, not being a good leader, or not being a born leader, so to speak, and then still become a great leader. What do you think about this?
This makes more sense to me. Like I said, I definitely believe that there are things that, as a result of life, will give you some types of perspectives or skill sets that can be, very much applicable to leadership. But I really believe this more than anything, that there are certain things that collectively, when you think about leadership and influencing people, are important, and they are skills that can be learned over time. Like I said, some through kind of just the environment that you grew up in, but quite a bit of them from having leaders in your life that really kind of role model and show these very specific behaviors or traits that you can then understand how they influence you, and be able to take from them to then help to influence other people. So, I kind of subscribe more to this idea than the idea that leaders are born.
This is a very interesting topic because when someone says that someone's a born leader, I don't always think they mean that it was genetic. I think what they mean is that they didn't learn these skills because they wanted to be a good leader, so they decided I need to learn how to do this better, and then they sought out situations and books and seminars and things to do, education of any type, to get better at this particular thing, which is kind of what we associate with a learned skill. The idea that these skills are learned and not something you're born with, but they're not learned because you had a desire to learn them, but rather they were learned because of the happenstance of the environment you were in and how you reacted to that environment, like what you had to do to get through that environment successfully taught you things without you even knowing you were being taught those things. And so there's kind of like this weird Venn diagram of it where it's like you can't just look at like, okay, what is in my genetic code versus what did I go to college for? There's an entire middle ground there that I think you're talking to, and those could really fall into either side, depending on how you interpret the idea of things that we are born with or things we bring with us versus things that we learn. And there are definitely some skills that I can think of as a leader that you can get better at by learning how to get better at it, by actually having somebody teach you how to get better at it. And there are also some leadership skills that I think that nobody's really born with, but we learn when we're 4 and 8 and 15, just because of the friends that we have and the environments that we're in. So, again, where that falls on the spectrum of born leader versus I learned how to do this, it's a debate we can have. But the more important thing, I think, is how does this impact leaders today, right? If I'm a leader today, knowing this about myself and that I have certain personality traits that will make me a better leader, it might feel better to say, yes, I can learn that, I can get better at these things from a standpoint of, not personal choice, and I can get better, not the world is just happening to me, oh well, and nothing I can do about it. So I like it from that standpoint, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every leader is going to go out and learn how to get better at these things.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think it's something that, I think some of the born leader versus kind of like trait skill building perspective as well, is like when you think about people that necessarily like didn't weren't assigned authority at any point, yet they influenced it. They influenced the ability to bring people along without the power of a title.
Sure.
And I think like over history, you kind of see like, oh, like this person was chosen kind of by a collective group of people to want to follow them, versus those that are given the authority or the title and say like, now you're in charge of these people. So I think that's a big part of it. But I agree with you. I think that there are definitely traits that I think you kind of have to. It's almost like one of those things where you kind of have to be somewhat okay at it just to have the opportunity to again like start to influence and lead people, but then you can build upon it over time for sure. And I know that's been kind of my personal story in leadership growth. It's like there are things that I brought with me from a personal accountability standpoint, from a social skill, kind of connecting with people standpoint, that allowed me to have good relationships with people. And then over time, understanding what those actual traits were, what are the ones that I have to be careful of not overusing, what are the ones that I definitely have to learn, sharpen up on, or build skill on to have the impact that I want to have, and then working with mentors over time to and then how do I blend these and apply them when most necessary, versus always having the same approach or the same trait that I'm utilizing every single time. And I think like there's a little bit of art and science in there, and I'm just that's what I think is every one of these traits, and there's a lot of traits out there, and I think almost every single trait you could probably apply to some type of a leadership lesson, but there are definitely some that stick out more than others in regards to helping you down the path of being a more effective or efficient leader.
Right, I agree. I think there's there's all these theories that we're going to talk about on this series. They have criticisms too, right? Because there's no such thing as a magic bullet of leadership theory where you can say, okay, we can define great leadership and we can predict great leadership, and it all rolls up into one thing here. There's a reason there are different ones, and there's a reason why there are hundreds of new books every year on leadership and different leadership theories. So this isn't really an answer we're ever going to have. It's more about the knowledge is power, and what you can. Anytime you can hear something or read something that helps you become more self-aware, or at least introspective in a way that helps you get better at the things that you're having trouble with, or to be able to predict your own behavior going forward based on past behavior, is a good thing. Some of the criticism of trait theory says that it only works going backwards. It only works connecting the dots backwards, meaning you can look at people who are considered great leaders and find these common traits among all of them. But if you look at people who have some of these traits early on before they become great leaders, it doesn't always work out that they become great leaders. And so why is that? Why is it that somebody would have some of these skills, which you can look at things like great communication skills, confidence, integrity, the ability to motivate others, to make a decision on the fly, as opposed to just wallowing in the indecisiveness. All these things. There are people who do all these things who, if you follow them, they do not become great leaders, or they're not leaders of people. And so there's got to be something else there. It isn't just, well, if you have these traits or can learn these traits, therefore you will become a great leader. Even if you can look at great leaders and say, look, they all seem to have a lot of these traits in common. And so there's got to be something missing.
I think it's part of my belief of support in are you actually providing the level of support to the person in a way in which they need it? And I think these traits are exactly the same thing. It's like, are you applying these traits in a way that's needed by the person that you're leading? And are you able to, as I mentioned earlier, kind of ebb and flow through the different types of traits for the different types of situations that you come across, and the different types of people that you're leading? Because it can be, we've all done in leadership, you've all done some of the situational leadership type of stuff, and you understand that not matching the capability of the employee, or the communication style of the employee, or what's needed in empathy with an employee, not matching those things the right way makes it really difficult to communicate effectively and to support somebody. And I think it's very much similar to this, is that, to your point, all these traits can exist in someone. But if they're not applying the traits with the proper filter of the nuance of the situation or the person, it doesn't matter how good these traits are. It's the wrong trait for the wrong person at the wrong time, and so the outcome is the same, which is probably like frustration, lack of engagement, lack of productivity, whatever that might be. So I think a lot of this boils down to that aspect of what traits are you using and when and why? And I think that's the professional growth element that a lot of the leaders have to go through. And I think of those that are extremely good at getting up in front of a team and communicating. Like I have a high level of communication skill, right? And then when it comes down to sitting down with one individual employee, they use the same tactic, and then somebody feels like, well, this is inauthentic, or you're not, like, it's not personal to me, and like it feels like you're just a robot. I heard the same pitch in front of 30 people that you're giving to me across the table right now. So again, we can live in this idea that communication is a trait and somebody's really good at it, but applying it in the wrong spaces does all of a sudden that trait's no good for you.
Right. And on the flip side, someone could be amazing one-on-one and just choke when they get in front of a group of people because that's just not their thing.
Right.
Does that make them not a great communicator? No, it makes them not a great public speaker, right? But that's not the same thing always, right? And you look at things like confidence or decisiveness as traits. If a decision is really difficult, and as a leader, you were able to get there very quickly in your head, to someone who is not very quick at getting there in their head, it may come off as that you don't understand the gravity of the situation, or that you're not considering all elements of it, that you're just making a haphazard decision about what to do. Even in your mind, you're thinking, well, I was able to consider everything, and this is the right way forward. It doesn't matter if it's right. It does. It matters if it's right, but it also matters as much that the people you are leading also believe it is right. Otherwise, they won't follow you. So they could be totally wrong, and you could be totally right and know exactly what you're doing and be able to make that decision quickly. But if you don't meet them where they are and just full speed ahead, when you're dealing with a group of people who might not be as confident as you are, you're not going to get them to come with you. They need to feel like that you are, walking back slowly and taking them by the hand and leading them with you sometimes, as opposed to just, charging forward and trusting they're going to be there. And so, so is decisiveness a good thing? Sure. But how do you apply it? Right? Do you in what situations do you apply it versus in what situations do you kind of temper it back a little bit, because there will be a ripple effect on your decision and how it's interpreted, regardless of how good you are at making it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like it's probably as a leader of leaders, it's what I'm constantly looking for is there an element where there's stickiness to lessons that are learned, or there's stickiness to like skills that are being that are being applied to something? Because again, like I think sometimes you can find through adjusting a leadership style that somebody has a specific trait that maybe they've always had, but they've never been able to really apply. And then you give them some space to apply the trait. So as an example, like let's say organization and like the ability to create a clear processes to help a team move forward. Like there's always a need for that. There's always a need for somebody to say, let's take these ideas, let's take this thing, and let's create a very specific strategy that everybody can align on and we can move forward and execute. And so you create a space for the person or the leader to do that, and they do a good job. But then of course like the bar gets higher. Now it's like, okay, the first time it's like I asked you to go and to do this and I gave you this responsibility and you made it happen. Now kind of my expectation is that I don't have to necessarily ask for you to do it, that you will see where you can plug yourself in, right, and say, hey, this is a natural trait of mine, or it's a trait that I've developed over time. I should be let me allow me to apply it in this space. And so like those are things that I'm looking at is like, are these traits and these skills not just showing up when I'm asking them to show up, but they're starting to show up on their own organically over time because the individual or the leader sees their ability to grow by utilizing that trait. So again, I just think that there's so much there in validating not just the traits do people have the skill, but are people getting better at utilizing the skill? And then as a leader, are you spending time validating that yourself? Are you spending time raising the bar? Are you saying they're really good at this, but like how would I how would I validate whether they were good at this at the next level, or the next level of responsibility, or the next job? And I think spending time in those spaces is helpful in making sure that you're not just letting people kind of stop because they are good at something as a trait, but really pushing them forward to get better at it.
You could be great at getting done the honey-do list around the house on over the weekend, and the list of things in my notes app that gets put on there about things I have to do around the house on this particular day, and I can get really good at getting all those things done. But the next level is the list not even needed anymore because I just see what has to get done, right? And it's the exact same thing. The result could be the same, but in one element you're being told exactly what to do or what the outcome is that you're looking for. In the other one, you can kind of see where you want to be, not just be told that this is where we have to go. And you're right that some people would do really well at that first step and just fail at the second one. Does that mean they're not good leaders? No, it means that there are certain things that they are good at and certain things they're not good at. And then as their leader, you have to decide, where can I plug this person in to where stretch assignments can make them better at this thing versus where are they going to continue to fail at? And so I shouldn't necessarily get them into a Peter principle kind of thing where they end up not liking their job or their life or their path anymore because they're so burnt out on trying to see where they can apply their skills that the skills themselves become not something they're passionate about or even good at anymore.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to consider the fact that one of the criticisms of the trait theory of leadership is that it only considers the leader and not the people being led. So I want you to get out your pen and paper. I want you to write down a list of traits, leadership traits, that you think your people need. Your particular set of people that report to you, or if you're not a leader and you want to be a leader, maybe your peer group. What leadership traits could they use or they need right now in order to be led effectively? And I want you to look at your skills, and I want you to see where they match up. The skills that you have that match up with what your people need right now are the ones that you want to put yourself into situations where you can utilize those and get better at them and refine them and hone them. The ones that you don't have that your people need right now, I want you to find ways of making sure that other people can get involved when it comes to solving problems that require those particular traits, because attempting to do them yourself when you're not good at them in the moment is just going to hurt the relationship with your people instead of helping them. So find ways of impacting positively where you do excel and the traits that you do have versus just trying to be all things to all people and thinking you can solve every problem.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and it's just a reminder of how important it is that we all take time as leaders to kind of just reflect on what is the work that we have as leaders, being responsible for people's development, being responsible for our own development, and what are the things that we utilize to help us find success, and how are we making sure that not only are we getting better at continuing to raise the bar of how we apply certain traits and skills, but are we helping our people to connect the same dots and bringing them along as well? I think otherwise what ends up happening is you have people that just continue to lean heavily into the things that they have given them success in the past, and you and I both know over time those things will continually evolve, and if you're not changing or adjusting or learning or growing or realizing how you apply these different traits in different spaces, then you can get stuck, and it can be really difficult to move forward if you're not evolving your own leadership skills as the workforce is raising the bar of expectation or adjusting the bar of expectation on what they're looking for in a leader.
Right. I totally agree with that. I think I look at this kind of similarly to how I would look at having the humility to say that you don't have the answer to a question that someone asks. Most leaders nowadays understand that you shouldn't just make up the answer if you don't have it, that it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but let me find out and get back to you. This is exactly the same thing. It's almost like saying, you know what, I don't have that trait, but let me find somebody who does and I'll get back to you. And being able to do that will do more for you as a leader and your relationship with your people than trying to have that answer or trying to summon that trait on the fly before you have intentionally tried to get better at it and just kind of hoping that you're able to get there.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.